working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hi, I'm Eliana Sebastian bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region. On tonight's headlines. Myanmar's ruling junta has confirmed that it carried out an airstrike on a village in which dozens of people were reported killed, drawing condemnation from the United Nations and Western powers. The top defense and diplomatic officials from the United States and Philippines agreed to complete a roadmap in coming months to cover the delivery of U.S. defense assistance to the Philippines over the next 5 to 10 years.
With regard to
top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken and Defense Chief Lloyd Austin spoke with their Ukrainian counterparts on Tuesday as Washington seeks to reassure its allies after a leaked trove of highly sensitive documents appeared online. And the latest IMF World Economic Outlook warns that global growth will turn lower in 2023 with advanced economies output less than half the rate seen last year. First in our news, Myanmar's ruling junta has confirmed that it carried out an airstrike on a village in which dozens of people were reported killed, drawing condemnation from the United Nations and Western powers. Take a look.
Strongly condemn the attack that we saw by the Myanmar armed forces today in Kambalu, in Sangang region. Those responsible for the attack must be held to account. The Secretary General offers his deepest condolences to the families of those victims, wishes a speedy recovery to those who have been injured, and very importantly, they need to be allowed to have the medical treatment they need, because we know that is often a challenge in these circumstances. The Secretary General condemns all forms of violence and reaffirms the primacy of protection of civilians in accordance with international humanitarian law, reiterates his call for the military to end the campaign of violence against the Myanmar population throughout the country, in line with Resolution 2669. I mean, this is just a latest example of just the horrific toll on civilians that the situation in Myanmar is having. You have on top of that the food prices, fuel prices being driven up.
UN Rights Chief Volker Turk said he was horrified by the deadly airstrike, whose victims he said included school children performing dances, with a global body calling for those responsible to be brought to justice. The death toll from the early Tuesday morning strike on the remote Kanbalu township in the central Sagaing region remains unclear. At least 50 fatalities and dozens of injuries were reported by BBC Burmese, the Irrawaddy and Radio Free Asia, as well as a witness contacted by AFP. The junta confirmed late Tuesday night that the strike had taken place, but did not say how many were killed. The spokesman blamed mines planted by the People's Defense Force for some of the deaths. The United Nations, while not confirming at all, said several civilians were killed, with Turk accusing Myanmar's military of once again disregarding clear legal obligations to protect civilians in the conduct of hostilities.
This is part of a larger pattern that we are seeing across Myanmar, where the security forces are targeting civilians in a systematic way. These are the sort of crimes against humanity that we have been speaking about, and it calls out for an urgent international investigation to get to the bottom of what has happened here and other atrocities that have been committed over the past several months. Ideally, we will see a concerted push to try to cut off all sources of aviation fuel to Myanmar. That, I think, should be the logical outcome of what has happened here. Quite clearly, the Myanmar Air Force is being used to attack civilian targets. And so there needs to be action to deprive them of the basic resources they need to operate. We can't just sort of sit back and hope that something will get better. The international community, continues to issue these statements. But, the Myanmar people have already figured out that if it's just a statement that's coming out, it's not going to mean anything. There needs to be concrete action. And ideally, this will reinvigorate the effort to try to press for an international arms embargo against the Myanmar junta. It's an area that matters a great deal to the Myanmar military because this has been their traditional recruiting ground. The ethnic Burmans from Sagaing, who are poor but proud, in the past would join the Myanmar military. This used to be an area where the Myanmar military looked for recruits. And now it has gone completely the other way. And so the Myanmar military believes that if they can get control of some of these heartland regions, that maybe they can turn the tide against the insurgency against them.
Thousands of people have fled into Thailand following fierce fighting between Myanmar rebels and the military. Myanmar has been in turmoil since Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government was toppled in an army coup 2 years ago. Thai officials said skirmishes had broken out Myanmar's military and armed ethnic rebels near the Karen State outpost town of Nyawadi, bordering Thailand's Tak province. The attack officials said local armed forces, police, and the civil administration were closely monitoring the situation. Long-established ethnic rebel groups as well as dozens of People's Defense Forces militias have emerged in opposition to the coup and clash frequently with the military. The top defense and diplomatic officials from the United States and the Philippines agreed on Tuesday to complete a roadmap in coming months to cover the delivery of U.S. defense assistance to the Philippines over the next 5 to 10 years. Take a look.
In the face of coercion and gray zone aggression, Secretary Galvez and I agreed to redouble our efforts to strengthen our combined ability to resist armed attack by modernizing our armed forces. We also discussed near-term plans to complete a security sector assistance roadmap to support the delivery of priority defense platforms over the next 5 to 10 years, including radars, unmanned aerial systems, military transport aircraft, and coastal and air defense systems.
At today's meeting, we redoubled our commitment to modernizing the Philippine-U.S. alliance, recognizing that our partnership will need to play a stronger role in preserving an international law-based international order.
EDCA allows U.S. access to Philippine bases for joint training, repositioning of equipment, and building of facilities such as runways, fuel storage, and military housing, but not a permanent presence. Austin said it was too early to discuss what assets the United States would like to station at Philippine military bases under a recently expanded Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement, or the EDCA.
And so the addition of these EDCA sites puts us in a position to be able to not only train together, but also respond to meet the needs of the Philippines in the event of a crisis like a natural disaster. It's essential to our ability to strengthen our combined deterrence posture. I think it's a bit early to try to discuss numbers and specific timing of rotations, but certainly these are things that Secretary Galvez and I will continue to work on going forward.
Manalo said the EDCA sites were mainly aimed at improving military interoperability, addressing potential humanitarian disasters.
The basic purposes of these sites would be to address humanitarian disaster-related events, to increase and improve interoperability and training of Filipino and American assets, and also to be in a position to improve interoperability and perhaps respond to other types of security challenges.
what I hear from countries around the world, and what I believe is profoundly in our interest, is for us to manage the relationship with China responsibly. And our goal is peace, security, stability, creating opportunity. It's not to engage in a new Cold War. It's not to contain China. But in doing that, in trying to advance a world that is peaceful, secure, stable, and with more opportunity.
And to recall yesterday, President Marcos assured China that military bases accessible to the U.S. would not be used in offensive action. He also stressed that the arrangement with
Some
Washington was
refreshments
designed to
at
boost his country's
Bumalu with
defenses.
Hall A. Thank
Experts
you.
say the United States sees the Philippines as a potential location for rockets, missiles, and artillery systems to counter a Chinese amphibious invasion of Taiwan, which China claims as its own. The United States promised to defend the Philippines in the dispute-rife South China Sea as the allies launched their largest ever joint exercises in the face of Beijing's growing assertiveness in the region. Nearly 18,000 troops are taking part in the annual exercises, the Balikatan or shoulder to shoulder in Filipino, which for the first time will include a live fire drill in the South China Sea, which Beijing claims almost entirely. The drills follow Monday's conclusion of a 3-day Chinese military exercise that simulated targeted strikes in a block of self-ruled democratic Taiwan, which Beijing considers part of its territory. Take a look.
Secretary Austin and I also reaffirmed the United States' unwavering commitment to standing with the Philippines against any intimidation or coercion, including in the South China Sea, and to preserving a region that's governed by international law, where goods and ideas and people can move freely.
It's been, we're doing the Balikatan yearly, and we don't expect any violent reaction, considering that this exercises is intended for our collective defense with the U.S. and other allies. For today, for this Balikatan, we have the participation of, as I've said earlier, 17,000 troops, including 12,000 Americans, 5,000 Filipinos, and 111 Australians. We have also observers from the ASEAN nations and also from other allies.
Thank you. May request or...
The Americans will also use their Patriot missiles, considered one of the best air defense systems in the world, and the HIMARS precision rocket system, which has helped Ukrainian forces fighting the Russian invaders. Philippine Army Major General Marvin Licutin said the two armies originally planned to fire live rounds at sea of the northern province of Ilocos Norte, about 355 kilometers from Taiwan's south coast, but moved it farther down the South China Sea. He said the original site was not sufficiently prepared for unloading the needed equipment. The new venue is less than 300 kilometers east of the Chinese-held Scarborough Shoal. Top U.S. diplomat Antony Blinken and Defense Chief Lloyd Austin spoke with their Ukrainian counterparts on Tuesday as Washington seeks to reassure its allies after a leaked trove of highly sensitive documents appeared online. The breach, which has sparked a criminal investigation by the Department of Justice, includes classified information about Ukraine's battle against invading Russian forces, as well as secret assessments of U.S. allies. Take a look.
With regard to Ukraine itself, I did speak to Foreign Minister Kuleba today, and in speaking to him, among other things, I reaffirmed our enduring support for Ukraine and for its efforts to defend its territorial integrity, its sovereignty, its independence, reaffirmed the extraordinary support that we have provided to Ukraine along with dozens of other countries over the last year.
I just spoke with my counterpart in Ukraine today, Minister Oleksiy Reznikov. We talked about a number of issues, but as we typically do. But he and the leadership remain focused on the task at hand, and I have every confidence that they will do what good leaders, great leaders do. They will fight the enemy and not be driven by a specific plan. They have a great plan to start. And again, I won't speculate. I will tell you that we take this very seriously, and we will continue to investigate and turn over every rock until we find the source of this and the extent of it.
But one top secret document said tough Russian defenses and enduring Ukrainian deficiencies in training and munition supplies probably will strain progress and exacerbate casualties during the offensive. The Post reported a document reviewed by AFP. This one marked secret, detailed in the dire state of Ukrainian air defenses. But the document dated February 2023, the authenticity of which could not immediately be confirmed, said that 89% of Ukrainian medium and high range air defenses was made up of SA-10 and SA-11 Soviet-era systems that could soon run short of ammunition. The Post also reported that another document said Egypt's President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi ordered the production of 40,000 rockets for shipment to Russia, telling officials to keep it secret to avoid problems with the West. But White House National Security spokesman John Kirby pushed back against the report. Dozens of photographs of documents, some of which also point to U.S. spying on allies and partners, including Israel, South Korea, and Ukraine, have been found on Twitter, Telegram, Discord, and other sites in recent days, though some may have been circulating online for some time. Many of the documents are no longer available on the sites where they first appeared. U.S. officials are scrambling to reassure its allies and partners. As for Ukraine, they're blaming Russia for the leak, while Russia is pointing to the U.S. as the source. The latest IMF World Economic Outlook warns that global growth will turn lower in 2023 with advanced economies output less than half the rate seen last year. Let's listen in.
The world economy is still recovering from the unprecedented upheavals of the last 3 years, and the recent banking turmoil has increased uncertainties. We expect global output growth to fall from 3.4% last year to 2.8% in 2023, before rising to 3% in 2024, mostly unchanged from our January projections. Advanced economies are expected to see an especially pronounced growth slowdown, from 2.7% in 2022 to 1.3% in 2023. Global headline inflation is set to fall from 8.7% in 2022 to 7% in 2023 on the back of lower commodity prices, but underlying core inflation is proving to be stickier. Importantly, this outlook assumes that recent financial stresses remain contained.
Persistent high inflation globally has caused central banks and governments to tighten financial conditions, but that's exposed some banking vulnerabilities, leading the fund to warn of risk to growth.
Once again, risks are heavily tilted to the downside. They have risen with the recent financial turmoil. Most prominently, recent banking system turbulence could result in a sharper and more persistent tightening of global financial conditions. The simultaneous rate hikes across countries could have more contractionary effects than expected, especially as debt levels are at historical highs. There might be a need for more monetary tightening if inflation remains stickier than expected. These risks and more could all materialize at a time when policymakers face much more limited policy space to offset negative shocks, especially in low-income countries.
The recent headlines surrounding financial sector turmoil highlight the need for vigilance in banking institutions that may have vulnerabilities to their balance sheet exposed.
First, as long as financial stress is not systemic, as it is now, the fight against inflation should remain the priority for central banks. Second, to safeguard financial stability, central banks should use separate tools and communicate their objectives clearly to avoid unwarranted volatility. Financial policies should remain laser-focused on preserving financial stability and watch for any buildup of risks in banks, non-banks, and the real estate sectors. Third, in many countries, fiscal policy should tighten to ease inflation pressures, restore debt sustainability, and rebuild fiscal buffers. Finally, in the event of capital outflows that raise financial stability risks, emerging market and developing economies should use the integrated policy framework, combining temporary, targeted foreign exchange interventions and capital flow measures where appropriate.
But Gourinchis pointed out there could be a tipping point where action to control inflation may be superseded by the need to foster stability. The report noted that the effects of inflation and tightening financial conditions in the developed economies is having spillover effects to low-income and developing countries. Meanwhile, the IMF also announced in a press briefing today that financial stability risks have increased rapidly since the October 2022 Global Financial Stability Report, as the resilience of the global financial system has faced several tests. Take a look.
We've all witnessed the recent events in the banking sector. These are powerful reminders of the challenges now being faced as we see tighter monetary policy and tighter financial conditions at the same time as financial sector vulnerabilities are building up. The immediate and forceful policy response reduced market anxiety, but sentiment remains fragile. Strains are still evident across other institutions as investors reassess the health of the financial system. The emergence of stress in financial markets also complicates the task of central banks as they seek to maintain a path towards higher interest rates in the face of stubbornly high inflation.
The impact of tighter monetary and financial conditions could be amplified because of financial leverage, mismatches in asset and liability liquidity, and a high degree of interconnectedness within the non-bank financial intermediation sector and with the traditional banking institutions.
Looking beyond financial institutions, buffers built by households and corporations during the pandemic have given them more room to absorb financial shocks. But these buffers are deteriorating, leaving them vulnerable to defaulting on their debt. When we look at large emerging markets, we see that they have so far avoided adverse spillovers from the recent turmoil. However, financial stresses intensify, and a sizable pullback from global risk-taking could trigger capital outflows across emerging markets. For smaller and riskier emerging market economies, we see that they continue to face debt sustainability strains and funding challenges.
The emergence of stress in financial markets complicates the task of central banks at a time when inflationary pressures are proving to be more persistent than anticipated.
Clear communication by central banks about their objectives and policy functions is crucial to minimize economic and financial uncertainty. Central banks should use available tools to address financial stability risks, which should help them to separate monetary policy objectives from financial stability goals. And this should allow them to continue the tightened policy to address inflationary pressures. The recent bank failures brought to light weaknesses in bank supervision and regulation, as well as failures in the bank's internal risk management practices, in particular with respect to interest rate and liquidity risk. Supervisors should ensure banks have risk management and corporate governance that matches their risk profile. If financial strains intensify and threaten the health of the financial system amid high inflation, trade-offs between inflation and financial stability objectives may emerge. Policymakers should act swiftly to prevent any systemic event that may adversely affect market confidence in the resilience of the global financial system.
As my usual habit, I'd like to end the day on a positive note. Let's encourage and build each other up so that no one is left behind. From EBC Vietnam Bureau, I'm Aliana Faith Sebastian. We live in extraordinary times.